Sangye chedan tsoge chonam la chanju pardo dani kyapsunche Page jinso yebe tsonam ge Rola penjire sangye nrubar Sangye chedan tsoge chonam la chanju pardo dani kyapsunche Page jinso yebe tsonam ge Rola penjire sangye nrubar Sangye chedan togi chonam la chanchu parto dani kyatsunche dage shinso gibe chonam ki rola panjire sangye nrupa sangye chedan togi chonam chanchu parto dani kyatsunche dage shinso gibe chonam ki rola panjire sangye nrupa Simjan Tamje Dewa Devi Yudan Dembara Simjan Tamje Lungal Lungal Ge Yudan Tawar Simjan Tamje Lungal Mebe Dewa Mindawa Simjan Tamje Nirin Chadan Nidan Nyamla Nebara Gyuruji Simjan Tamje Dewa Devi Yudan Dembara Simjan Damje Dungal Dan Dungal Gi Yudan Tawara Simjan Damje Dungal Mebe Dewa Dan Mindawa Simjan Damje Nirin Chadan Nidan Nyamla Nebara Gyuruji Simjan Damje Dewa Dan Devi Yudan Dembara Simjan Damje Dungal Dan Dungal Gi Yudan Tawara Simjan Damje Dungal Mebe Dewa Dan Mindawa Simjan Tamje Nirin Chadan Nidan Nyamla Nebara Gyurji Simjan Tamje Dewa Devi Yudan Dembara Simjan Tamje Dungal Dungal Ji Yudan Tawar Simjan Tamje Dungal Mebe Dewa Mindawa Simjan Tamje Nirin Chadan Nidan Nyamla Nebara Gyurji Idam Guru Ranamendala Kanya Atayami.
Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. This ground spread with incense, adorned with strewn flowers, Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagined as a Buddha land, and by offering it to you, may all living beings enjoy this pure land. Thus, meeting the teaching of the peerless teacher is due to the spiritual mentor's kindness. I dedicate this virtue for all living beings to be cared for by excellent spiritual friends. Yiram Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryata Yami.
Konge Dujingi Zongo, Tawatam Japambe, Tambechin, Konge Kodam, the Law Chata. Yeah, that Kulon the Shibuk, Chimbuchagore, Chewing in Shedugala, Kulon the Chanchuki, some Zimbachawade, the Messiu Chimbuchadi, Res. Ani Ranchin Jisumandachi. Ani Kanji, Che Nene, Nyamnejar. Anything Jimben Chanchuki, some Gizimbachawade, Shujin Nechum Ketchumbuchayores.
And so our motivations are very, very important. And at this time, it is the motivation, the altruistic mind of Bodhicitta that is very, very important. This is something that is really exceedingly important as a motivation when one listens to the teachings. And so one should listen to the teachings in a way that one is not connected with any kind of self-agenda, not connected at all towards that agenda at all, but rather listening to the teaching, settling in to one's own practice while holding bodhicitta, the mind that wishes to benefit others. And so holding this motivation in a very settled way in our practice as we take in the teachings is something that is a very important and crucial point.
Nyamnenche ne chesho de leptiore dajen je baas ta kechimbo kazana dajen nyamba da dajen je pe dorten to zon rosar somas tate nyamnen ta yong na ma da ta di dajen je ba de la shuji rale di res wata te indigala ti di la garoji kompale be na te oni dajen je pe nyamnen ngoni jare de la pe le la bocha gres ti indukala shibuji ne chambu chayores.
And so for us here now at this juncture in our text, the Way of the Bodhisattva by Master Shantideva, here we're in this 8th chapter on meditative concentration, which is so very important. Actually, it is really, we're really at the most important juncture of this text, where we have come to and have been studying some very, very important trainings that are, really the crux of our practice. Our practice depends on these trainings, and they are the trainings of seeing all sentient beings as equal, and then exchanging our own agenda, our own self-caring agenda for caring for others. And so these are very, very important things. And once we can really solidify this in our practice goes on, and it's much easier moving forward in our actual practice. And so this is really a very crucial juncture that we're at here.
Kazan have the regular subject ko kershechna yang chidi kazane rotare subject kershechna pendo yung grace ta kanji rajen je badala ye tundu wada ye brashba dorthen de Geshe ni chene ta yebar shibadela Geshe tang tundi ni oda Geshe de la tangbo ene be yebar shibadela sabje sum tangmyong dwa rajin da jinjin komparche bas da jinjin da aba shen jinjin komparche bas tangbo da shen jinjin komparche ba da jinjin torwarche ba ani da da shen zo hyun da yunden she bas da da shen ni hyun da yunden sha da jinjin hyun da shen jinjin yunden de she ures sabje sumjine 다 진진진 곰버체 받달라 삽제 ngatom gdwa 삽제 nge nane kasang 삽제 sum rosarre 다 karin rore sidikala 진진진 곰버체 받달라 라진 주니신 lumba jiwar kubasida 다 nganazu yundu 진진진 la 곰바 mendengen ran진진 shira tambo yene 진진진 nga tu mare samdarlo da ngam shushu yongurwa dichego mares 곰바 kenate kale 진진진의 곰비스리 용거래 ranchi 맞아다 진진의 껴토마 매번 곰병원이 오셔서 겨지르마도 그 로양답하지 말와 로양답하지 마인도 곰병원 그 고시고 주모 저거도 왔어 대나진 진진진의 양 곰주나 애니 디 슈추모 차그래 했어 돈다 텔레거래 빼면 야보도와 대 지데 계산 랍사래 양 뒤서 가로래 다왜 삽제데 돈다 됐던 일이지 했어
So let's go back and look at exactly where we are in the text and how it's broken down at this point. And so we enter into this section of the text where there are two major distinctions of classification, that in which the trainings are expressed briefly, and that in which the trainings are expressed in detail. And so at this point, we are at the point where we have finished the brief, the verses that express it briefly, and now in relation to the trainings that are set forth in a very extensive way, there are three sections in the more extensive explanation. And those three are how we become habituated to and train in learning to cherish others. And that's the first one. The second one is how we learn to abandon and conquer self-cherishing. And the third section is looking at the faults and qualities within self-cherishing and cherishing others. And so now we are at the point within these three where we are learning to habituate cherishing others, this training. And within this section, there are actually 5 points in learning to train and habituate in taking others as one's main cause. And there are 5, we've finished 3. And so now where we are, the remainder that we have to look at there is how to get used to this, how to familiarize and habituate, learning to put others as first, to really, above all else, have this other cherishing, really caring about others. And so this takes repetition and familiarization, because actually we have so strongly been living and experiencing life in a way that we're very habituated to really caring about our own agenda, to really putting ourselves first. And this is something that we have gotten so used to that this is the natural way that we go about our life and our experiences. And so it may seem difficult to really have this shift, but we shouldn't be discouraged thinking, oh, I can never do it. It'll never happen. Because it can. But the reality is since beginningless time, we've been coming from this place of really being the center of our own world, the center of our own universe from beginningless time. So these tendencies and habits are very thick and they're very strong. However, this is not the true, authentic, sincere nature of our being, of our souls. And so we can change this. We can get to the point where we have a shift where others are actually really central to all of our actions. And so we can change this tendency that we now have.
Oda teacher da nipade namila metrwa kompan be pardamba as de tatri subject nipade da ti ta teaching tumu mayim be teba chimbe chugi nyamne chetan sungware maranzo karzna gawaji chena jena pendana o ti pa pendana nga chi sonam sagre ni setting bochig nga pe lonja yabo yongirsa samdi chigirwa teni chigio marela then rewadang naminda tene mare bachene ni pe jivaina chuchusunu gures disungor tateri dingune kechembore ko shivuji ne chambu chadiore o keba chimbe ta pe kazane ngola mangbon namil meroz mangbon rudwa di tijin be ta pe keba chimbe chuche tha gi zawari chagor pe ne chambu chadiore 어떻게 나가서 최지디가라 아니 직나 시디가라 단진된 내용도 단진의 제가 단진의 pongo라 왔다 오니 시행 그래 단진의 pon야래 단진의 만데와 지고도야 남밀라 말해와 아니 pe 디불라 말해봐 아니 pe 수수그는 삐따보시자이나 디부 고용요 말해 유풍좀 서서나 디부끼로 와 yu pungum thobaji majuwa ina dibu kigmarwa wata tenson jire te inda kati ina jempen chudi gala naminda tendila samtangyo mare esila gore kanje ranjingingi timama gobaji chue pitaboji jagore ze desun gore
Ditrima kontaktet gok taksong
ranjingingi timama goba ranjinginna mandeba
Di sache nipa ki di tsi karere?
Namilla miltepar te kumpalam be paas.
Gompala beba.
Namilla matoche. Any jenjin lo de kumpalam be gures, kumpaki gures.
And now this second point here, also to look at within this, is within this context of our training, how we should be separated from any wish for a karmic fruition or receiving anything in return, any kind of reward or result in return, and additionally becoming habituated in this. And so now we come to a point that is very particular towards the Mahayana vehicle, towards this great vehicle within the different vehicles of Buddhism. And actually, this is what we call the uncommon vehicle, because there are actually some very extraordinary practices within the great vehicle of the Mahayana. So generally speaking, when we practice the Dharma, we practice with these kinds of things in mind, thinking that, oh, this is a really great accumulation of merit that I will receive here. Oh, from doing this particular practice, then I will achieve a long life. Oh, from this particular practice, then I will be able to gather and attain material wealth and different enjoyments. But no, here what we remember within the practices of the Great Vehicle, that we need to be free from any wish or any thought of a karmic fruition or any kind of return for oneself. And with this kind of an attitude, then our Dharma practice, our practice actually does become the Dharma. Because this actually, being free from any kind of wish to gain anything for oneself, is the very root of the Mahayana, the very root of what is called the Great Vehicle. And so whenever we practice this thought of an I, this fixation and connecting this practice to that concern of an I is something to be abandoned, is something that we should be separated from, is something that we should have be completely free from the stain of self-clinging. If we're free from any kind of a thought or a notion of an I in connection to this practice, this is authentic practice. And so therefore one will receive an authentic result, because when one has the absolute perfect and excellent cause, then one will receive the authentic and perfect result. But otherwise, if one doesn't have this, then the perfect result will not arise. And so therefore, whenever we practice, we should do so with the thought of practicing for it to benefit others, not oneself. Don't think about yourself, and don't connect yourself, don't be involved in this practice in any way that holds the stains of the taint of the attitude of self-clinging.
Otat sumpade dire jenden checherche baas jengiton tap rande ranjinjin lode dorne jenjinjin lode maron zigila ran nga sambade chuchumorwa jen samlode chungchungorwa da jendun de pe kyachimbo chegores pe checherche pe mambu pelgu gres bezuchen pelgu gres la bore te pena jerizigi ta so jendeng wala zawadi niji go sare niji ene kompashu chumbole teni jendon rashu gu yongya chagore jengi dungal sendo lo de kengura ta pede nipe gombo cherizi kesan rosan ani cherizi la soata na nipe jiba mombo segirese ne dombo kope lungtane kesan tusan wata tesure ta yundu niji samtang wata pe minsibi kechemore yarmuche kaloba ni ne chede niji zawa jengi che inza yarmuche sungda pe dumdevores ta ngone nije la kompak kya wada pe minsibe kechembore nije samdola nije samlo tana ngazo yunsingo mar ngazo kompash uyo marwa yunsingaina tate kompak tange yunsina nije samlo tana seno lincha dan jide na teni ngala shidage kepra chembo chadi gar oda teni pe pendo chembo ar zawa de Jawatam chegi nijizu sundu in cherizirwa.
Gyalwa tam chegi
Nijizu sutum degende cherizi. Ota tendi indugi cherizi de nije la cho chadi gore. Ota zunga igi tuma den cherizi gi ta zung sidga lindone na nije pelgi gore. Kepin chebo gore tezo. Pe mesiba pento chebo gore.
And so with this second point, then we habituate in abandoning self-clinging, abandoning our self-cherishing, And in the third point, then the third point is concerned with increasing our concern for others. And so generally thinking, we have a very, very strong sense of an I. We are very self-serving in our actions and attitudes, and we think very little about others. But here in the third category of these trainings, we look to take this other cherishing and have it further and further established and increased. And actually, we need to make concentrated effort and be very diligent about this so that it really does increase in a way that eventually leads it to be second nature. And so Chenrezig is the very embodiment of compassion. And therefore, when we practice Chenrezig, then just this feeling of compassion that naturally arises for us leads us in a way that in our mind that naturally we become very empathetic about the difficulties that others might be going through, really caring about others and wishing to dispel any of their difficulties and sufferings. And so we talked about this a little bit before, about how the supplicating Chenrezig and settling into the practice of Chenrezig, which is a practice that really instills compassion within one's own heart, is something that is a very, very beneficial practice that for us to be engaging in. And also His Holiness the Dalai Lama, right? He always says this when he's speaking to others. He says, my religion is compassion. And so really the very, very heart of the practice is this compassion. And this is what we really need to establish as a foundation for ourselves. But generally speaking, this isn't something that is something we think about a lot. It's something that's not our nature or not our habit. But actually, if we can work with these trainings in a way that compassion becomes something that is always arising, becomes a very foundation of our being, this is something that will really benefit us. And as it said, that that compassion, like Chenrezig, who is the embodiment of compassion, is the compassion of all the conquerors. And so this great compassion is at the very root of all the Buddhas. And also then, as Chenrezig is the embodiment of compassion of all the conquerors, when we recite the 6-syllable mantra of Chenrezig, compassion naturally arises in our minds. And having this compassion naturally arise in our mind is something that is increasingly and exceedingly beneficial. Very, very helpful.
제상 그상 동북고변 되나라 니 민lensum temba이나 아니 코로나라 빠차와다 코르게나라 빠차와다 지범에 셀그레즈 숭도아 베티 제리지 남터랑라 베 살보도 와시 디 전준대와 가르사 디시 연된 붐상생인데 전준대와 침보데 데나라 제리지 남터데 룽땅상도 베야보도
두세 용텐
연된 붐상 붐바 장보 붐바 장배나라 리부 쥐장보 루그로와 와다 테지거라 인주 테나라 디숭도와 제리제 넘버 타발레 강그 우체 다테나스 우이시디가라 가라도 셈바 냠바 셈 줌송와 루이 나제 동용데가라 애니 제리제라 소와테 텐디지바이나 셈라 포바게 그래 토낭레 그래 애니 베 지나레 마레라레 강게 구체 다테나 티 구파 다게 도스 티 구파 엠베 제리즈랑게 도그레스 도트그레스 거래 간시 니시게 떼떼떼 니시게 나 텐디페 셈리용에다 텐디 텐 소인이용에요 말에 베미스베 깨침버리 랑게 토페 몰람디스 딱 알아서 Monam Gedigala, any best Tibachim Bichigala, sometimes they were done then Zungal Tatal, Zungalji, Judan Trabaji chickens the Monam Gagorwa. Any bay, Devatan Dembala, they were Punsum Sobaji Gora. Lipachi and Mijaji go up Punsum Sopachi, Rankison, Yonsu, Dinisagi, Demba in the Sudwa. What a tenajin Digala, he in Dibudena, any bay. Cherizilla Swatavinat, Monum tended Teva Najinji, Divune Be, Lember Yungris. Divupum Sopa the Yungris, the Sundwa. In the bay, he Cherizi Namtana, the soon shall get a daughter. So Nijing and Chadre. Got you in a Nijil Dichere. Niji? We doubles in the Niji and a bay, Niji Chimbuch Guna. Jenden Cheser Yo Mare.
Kade Yo Mare?
Jenden Lapchambo.
Oh, Jenden.
Jenden Cheser Yo Mare. Subject Honor Jenden Cheser Jabaz and Zigidwa. What a terry. The Missibuke Chambo was. The city guy dying the Yuri the Council Tungri and Yan the sometime with Beck Chambo is.
And so in regards to Chenrezig, Avalokiteshvara, and the power of great compassion, just like we learned about last week in verse number 18, that is why even the very name of Chenrezig brings great blessings. And as we learned that it was said and prophesied that Chenrezig said that, even saying my name, I can dispel all sufferings and dispel all fears. One can be free of all fears, and their sufferings can be dispelled simply by my name. And actually, there is a quote in that comes from the biography, so a commentary on the biography of Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezig, that is called The Nectar of Qualities of the Excellent Vase. So excellent vase meaning like a bumpa that can hold this dutsi nectar. And so within this quote, it says, whosoever finds themselves in a state of decline and dejection. So what this means here is that anyone who finds themselves feeling mentally dejected and discouraged, or maybe overcome and overwhelmed, or sick, suffering from medical conditions, if that one, and then further it says in the quote, at that time, if they remember me, I will turn back that dejection and decline. And so if one brings to mind Chenrezig, brings Chenrezig to their mind, then all of their mental worries and fears and miseries will be eliminated, and actually a great encouragement in their minds will arise, and they will be free from all fear. And so as it says here, then Chenrezig said, then by remembering me, their fears can be reversed. And this is because when you bring to mind Chenrezig, what you bring to mind is love. You bring to mind compassion. And when you hold compassion in your mind, when compassion arises, one can have no worries. And then further on it says, by this, my foremost aspiration, may I be endowed with the treasure of its fruition. And so here what we have really exemplifies an aspiration of the great vehicle of Mahayana, the wishing to separate those from suffering, this aspiration. And just like we say in our prayers, may all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. This is the aspiration of the great vehicle. And in regards to the practice of the great vehicle, the Buddha himself has said, completely abandon all non-virtue, perfectly practice virtue, thoroughly tame your own mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. So with aspirations and turning oneself towards practice like this, this is the authentic and excellent practice that will bring about the authentic and excellent fruition. And so we have this quote here from the life story, the biography of Avalokiteshvara Chenrezig, who primarily this very principle to this quote is compassion. And if we start by nurturing and building compassion, this grows into great compassion. And as we mentioned earlier within the outline of the different breakdown of this section of trainings, there is the training that brings us to be able to accomplish others' benefit in great waves, the great waves of benefit that we can bring to others. And actually this comes about from always thinking about others and always developing compassion for them. And so this is a quote, Geshe says that I can translate and to send to all of you, because Geshe says that this is a really profound quote that we should have kind of in our list of quotes to guide us. And so has asked me to get that to all of you so you can really make this a priority.
덴바르다 맞아 샘 줌야당 네 중국 말에 네 두부 말에 용해야 돼. 또 용사대 가래 용도. 아란진진 좀 슈체요 이거 용에 샘페 푸스도 보더라 이 슈체 용그래. 제가 니지 깨용데 갈라 쟁기 동al 샌드위치께도 샘들로 가래 미바 갸침보. 아니 샘기 니바데 갸체를 두고도 Tindi niji gyune kansa jila, ta teni ngen jong mara ngen nugu mara semen ten sawanyi ni yongwa marta. Nga se tupu yondenga, nga se shu chumbu yondenga, o ngen jong mara ngen nugu mara ngen dije de sem jumya de, semban jumya de pe misi ba mangu chagero. Chazan niji minam kya de pe misi ba kay chimbore.
So this is really very, very true to our experience. What we can see is the thought of, oh, I'll never be able to do it. No, not me. I can't get there. Never be able to do it. Where does this come from? This really comes from holding so strong, really gripping on to a fixed notion of ourselves the way we are. Really in a very narrow-minded way that doesn't allow for any growth, doesn't allow for the thought. So one thinks, I can't do it. No, can't do it, not at all. But on the other hand, from the heart that thinks about removing the suffering of others and helping others, one will never be discouraged. One will never think, I can't do it. No way. Because when one sets about on a mission to remove the suffering of others and help others, one doesn't get discouraged. It's such a vast and open mindset that one will the thought will never come, can't do it, I can't accomplish that. But rather, if we go back to that, I really going back to that narrow-minded, rigid and fixed notion, then we'll be back to that, thought of, I can't do it. I don't have the ability to do this. I'll never accomplish that. That's where we'll be stuck. But we need to really use our intelligence to know what compassion can help us open up to.
이 두스다 이 버도 계산 subject 로사거들이 다 subject 이바 다 젠진진 꼼나 깨는 거리에스 다티 순거래 subject 이바다 꼼나 깨는 거리에스
가래 용기래 유기래
subject 이바데 젠진진 꼼나 마꼼으로 마도 꼼나 깨니 시그리에스 깨는 거리에스
어허
다티 subject 이바 드린 로야 되더래.
And so now we enter, so we've talked about those three sections, and now we come to the fourth section that speaks about if one does, then become familiarized with making others principally important, or we could call it other cherishing, then the power and ability then does arise.
다들 쇼로가 야당 줄고 받으래도 야다 줄고 받아. 오늘 다 좀받쳐 거래. 곰발라 좀받쳐. 매서 맞으나 곰이야 가보러 와. 연된 말에 로빈 나와다 앞에 숨어라. 우만주베나라. 연된 말이 쫀디 젠도지. 소남로데 손이 니기교. 쫀디 가는 바로 주바데 사대지바 어느 터버 줄을 숨어라.
우말라 죽바에.
우만주베나. 연된 세달랑 고야 연된데 쫀디 이지 순당 거래. 대장 냠도 소남 사고 그래. 제 숨고래. 연된 말이 쫀디 젠도지니스. 쫀디 슈 충보 영엔달라. 연된 마키 그레스. 쫀디라래 버레스.
라소 야보고 츠마소 연친
연된 신 자말라 연 쫀디 워레스. 쫀디데 냠도 아니페 소남 사야가다 소남 사고래. 연된 말이 쫀디 젠도진. 소남 로데 손이 니기교스. 소남당 남죄당 로데 대도 강가 유저들 풍풍 소비지 소금 창고 때는 연된 야보용 그래라 그래.
So now in, we enter back into our text. We'll be on verse number 119. And Geshe points out here that, this is something now that we really need to be diligent about, and we really need to make a concentrated effort. This isn't something that's going to come out of nowhere, but we're going to need to bring this about with some concentrated effort, concerted effort on our side. And in the text, entering the middle way, the Chandrakirti Marave. The text by Chandrakirti, entering the middle way, he speaks about the very basis of accumulating good qualities to be effort, to be diligent effort. And so diligent effort together with accompanied with accumulation of merit is something that will bring on this like ocean of good qualities. And that with using our intelligence, the intelligence of our mind, then all of the good qualities of the mind stream will be complete.
맞아, 단다 깔래요레스, 강알요레스. 이는 지식이 비어 말했어. 내 중국어하는 건 중국 말했어. 뒷남이야 비어 말했어. 갈래치도 미자징. 딜터 꼼비 투이노스. 가르잖아. 다 배나 문제기 기부담바 장주세 받대도 배 진된 납침부지 영어야 돼. 로꼼 배우는 게 중으로 와. 대 꼼비 투리스. 강기 민튼지 바양 드니면은 미가른 줄으시. 다 배나르와. 마란존 다존지 당부배 미리 암조는 꼬다 미리 통다 지난 계지나양. 디긴 때 좁부차도야지도. 왔다 때나지레스. 마란존 마꿈무한기 낸 중말에 니구말에 진대 용말에 삼로도 고르고 알데. 곰소나 딜리라부차 그래서 순구하다 던다 됐더래. 그 뒤에는 지식 기는 개비어 말해.
Kare?
지식 낸 중국 말에서 지식 개비다 갈래 칠 도야 돼. 그 뒤에는 지기어 말해라래. 배나 로아 자가르게 펜투브레 거기 캐바테 되게도 간가 좀 받지. 아니 배자리 좀 된데 숨라 이치치 고난서 넘버 타par라라 문제 남타르도 진짜 늘지 냠내는 와 누시는 안저데 기부 꼬마 기부 담바 꼬메 남타르도 야는 양돌다 디지술로 누시네니 진들 주구레스라 실도 균지기야 말이 실도가 옛날에는 배사선 되는 균 까발레 리그 말이
Kare lat ki mare?
kabala ligi mare ngaso ta in dini california ndugu ina o ta rimborese de mandro ndesha ina legu marwa o chido chigiyo mare lare lega kandiji nare
And then in verse number 119, and so we should be undeterred by hardships. So first we look at the fact that to accomplish this, and remember we're speaking about accomplishing, accomplishing the benefit of others, making that our priority. This is something that's hard. It's not easy to do. It's something that is going to involve some difficulties. However, we should never be self-deprecating or really be doubting ourselves, thinking that we can't do it. Because if we think all of the past great masters, all the great masters and practitioners bodhisattvas who have come before us, that learned to completely devote themselves to altruism, to accomplishing the benefit of others, just complete bodhisattvas. How did they get there? They, they got there through difficulties. They also had to undergo hardships and difficulties and needed to really train their mind to make this really become their habit. This is the way they eventually were able to accomplish so much benefit for others. And in the text, for through the influence of use and habit, people even come to grieve for those whose very name struck terror in their hearts. And so, simply we have, we think about foes or enemies, and even hearing their name brings we clench and we fear, we become all rigid just from hearing their name. Where did that come from? That also came from habituation, for us thinking the same thing over and over again. So we must be very, very careful not to habituate the thought, oh, I can never do it, I'll never get there, too difficult for me. So we must be very, very careful, not to fall into that mindset, but rather just as all of the past panditas, be it the great panditas of India, the great masters of Tibet, what did they do? They gathered together, they studied, they read the scriptures, they read the words of the Buddha, they read the life stories of the Buddha, and then they practiced what was in the life stories of the Buddha and other masters. They actually made that their new habit. They really practiced what was in those life stories. So these life stories are actually very, very beneficial for us. And you should really look back to the life stories of those great masters and really look at what they emulate and look to actually do just as they had done in accomplishing others' benefit. So we must really be careful that we don't slip into the attitude of, I just don't have the ability to do that. I'm just not, strong enough, or I'll never get there. We must really be very, very careful about doubting ourselves and making that what we habituate.
겨와 치마 편지지 최들라 나중단 거라 아니 그시 강할 디슬라 녀지 따거래니까 니 중민도 나 용사 말해서 지랍 거래 어떻든지 균지기야 말 그뒤이나 닌전 니니 이니 지긴 세야데 뽑아도 슈춤보고 왜 뺏게침 버려 윤도 뽑아도 거래 뽑아도 뺏면서 뺏게침 버렸다 Dipa popa lago mar ngaso gawa popa gore lago Dipa labo mare gege suchi labo mare zinkye labo mare tamache labo mare de kontu ke labo mare ngamngam shushu gire kompat kompe wangire tesu kanga dochache labo mare ngaran so kanga digin rendare kanga 개위 초대 가서 또 뽑아 된 거한테 빼면서 게 전부도 와.
And so also Geshe said that, so we need to encourage ourselves along in reading these stories and really think we can do it. So for example, if you are thinking, okay, well, the goal is to get to California, but then you start thinking all kinds of things like, it's too far, the road's not so easy. So you're never going to get there if you discourage yourself. So we really have to take an attitude that brings us to a way that we're working towards, in a positive way, working towards our goal. And so we need to always, though, put some effort into this. This is something that we, have to understand that just like, we read in all the life stories of the past masters who faced obstacles and difficulties, we're going to face these too. But we need to, make sure we don't fall into this kind of thinking of I can't do it. But rather think, I'm able to do this, I can do this, I will do this. And give it our all. Really pump ourselves up, really encourage ourselves, into this. Because, we have to work against some, momentum that we've already built in the other direction. So, when we're talking about pumping ourselves up, this is in regards to virtuous activity, not to negative activities. Because when it comes to negative activities, we don't really have to train in these and learn them. We don't have to train in lying and divisive speech or really practice getting angry. This is something, we are pretty skilled in already. This is something that, we've done so much over and over again. Nothing we have to train in. We don't, and, also, are being obsessive and craving and desirous. this is something, very easily accessible for us, not something we have to pump ourselves up to know how to do and remember to do. But when it comes to virtue, we need to nudge ourselves. We need to kind of encourage ourselves, into this. And if we do this, have this I can do it attitude, then we can do it.
오다 꼼팔레 고야다 뽑아줘 가다 그래서 쉬고 개침 버려 꼼나 라워 먹기도 뭐다 가 요만이서 지발레 숨도 뭐 간데지나 마고 마지 꼼나 릴라고 미차지 제요 말았어 남루 다에서 오늘은 지난 탄도 가보도 와 근데 남루 다에서 남루 필요하다서 지난 탄도 가보도 와 terku 파우리 된데 첸도에서 지도 와 이나 곰치 곰발레티 칼라티서 강가 따다 지제시나 구페 양페 빠살다마선 땡연도 와 어떤나징 안한도 거기 쳐라 에 곰발레 주가다 빼 미스베 개침버래 뽑아도 빼 개침버다 그뒤는 뽑아 냠 주기요 말해 칠도에도 뽑을 당거 말아 뽑 응 중국 말을 해야 돼 뽑아길 당거 말아 뽑아 펠고 뽑아
So we have these two aspects or attitude that we're working with here. One is familiarization. So doing something over and over and over again, familiarization. And the other is really encouraging oneself, really, inspiring oneself, telling oneself, I can do it. And just like, Shantideva has said that there is nothing that once habituated will not become easy. And so actually whatever work it is, whatever activity it is, if we do it over and over and over again, it'll become like second nature. We'll be able to do it just from habituating and doing it over and over again. And so, you think about, pilots, in the beginning, they have never flown an airplane, never, soared through the skies and flown an airplane, but they train and they train and they practice and they practice. And, then flying an airplane just becomes something they can do. And this is because they have applied these two things, habituation and really, this encouragement, being motivated to do it. And after a while, it becomes autopilot, like we can do something on autopilot without thinking. It becomes second nature. So always, make sure that you're not working against an attitude, working against this thought of I can do it. Sometimes we can undermine ourselves. We can undermine our own mission by thinking, oh, I can never do it, too hard, not today, all kinds of thought. Because if we have those thoughts, we're really just undermining our own being inspired into this. So it's really important to remember not to do that, but always have the attitude of I can do it.
ya ta yin jin subject ngapadre subject ngapade rajin dungalle dol dope rajin jepar gombas
konda
rajin dungalle dol dope dungal yorwa dungalle dolor deni eni rajin jegi in the samlo gugu ares labre te yabodoa maso garda dungalde sel gurwa rangi dungal sel gure jengi dungal sel gurwa dungal ga ngazo mindo barwa sel gwaede kun dogi meza ngazo te sel gurwa ti sel gugu yana ta tanda bordo ran jinjin chini ore dungal le kyop tu yo mare talen kokap chini jen jinjin china dungal le kyop tu go te chasa ti jen jinjin no gom gugure ze tata ti sungware kechimbuwa
And so now, And so now we have a continuation. We have number 5. Number 5 of wishing to train in the training in cherishing others in a way that brings their suffering to an end, that eliminates their suffering, liberates them from suffering. And so we need to dispel the suffering of others in our practice, in our action. So just, like we all know, we don't desire suffering and others don't desire suffering and misery. And because others, as we've said, because others don't desire suffering and misery, I will dispel this suffering. And so up until this point, our mission has been involved in primarily really cherishing our own desires, our own wants, really self-cherishing. But now we need to increase our care about others, our cherishing of others, and eliminate self-cherishing. And so when we really work to have this shift in our attitude, when we are really caring about others, then what happens is our self-clinging actually declines. So we are working actually at both, increasing our self-cherishing and increasing other cherishing and eliminating self-cherishing.
Sholoka gather nishu paderedo. Oh, that isn't Gaji that Jen Namni Sedwa. Da Rang Dani Jen Tam Jen Namni Nurtu Chopper the Pates, Nurtu Chopsa de Carre. Sipa Kroi Zumali Kubia. Juanyandi Chipinyandeli Kubia. Did it? Siji Tani le Kuburis. That Rada Jendu Jepraja, Sametamba Jeprajas, Tintini Indigala, Siji Tani le Kubarjavala, any Karzan Chanjuki Sem Chipinyandeli Kubela, Chanjuki Sem Gomugura. Any Kurala Troyala, Songi Tobel, Songi Gomugura. Then the Kurala Troala, Songi Gogura. Kurve Kurvenji Tony Zamotomani Gomuguri. What a Tindi Indigala, Tindi and Be Kepachimbi, young law Mishung and Desola, any matching nature, joined on the me gonna Tenichigio Mare, Benichegore, somewhat Jenny, Bebitsu di Chegores, Nyanen di Chegores, Sungore. Package Murda. The Madame Azun, Demdens Richard, Michile Nimbe, Zikrutana, Nipe, Shibuche, and Dondo Chichido, Yundu Macheche, the Tenichio Marla, the Niche and Michi Chadura.
Kane Chagade?
Michi
Sana?
Michi said me on the gala, Pet, ten, Zipuchi, Garochu, Chuba, Shibujin Dondo Chigora.
Migichu.
Oh, Michi, the Mila. Mazu Demden Najin. Then the Chadel, Chigio Marlave. And a pay me low Mashong and Latarun Yaboya Martin Digla, Sandwich in Chegores, Yamlen Tigiti.
And then in verse number 120, those desiring speedily to be a refuge for themselves and others. And so we, here we're speaking, to speedily become protection, become a refuge for both oneself and for others. And what is it that we are looking to protect self and other from? We're looking to protect others and self from a samsaric existence, from a partial nirvana, or from falling into the extreme of falling into the jisi tani. Karigitani?
Sipa Korwachi, Jua Nyandeji, Chippy Nyande, Nyaranda Jumbi Nyandela, Chippy Nyandela Gore.
So from
Chanchuki Semgomna, any Chippy Nyande, Nyaran Yandela Mande, Sanki Koban to Warwa. Any Tony Tobel, Tony Gomna, any Corolletol to Gorwa. Siji Tani, Sipa the Jui, Tanika Letrone, Minibi Nyande, Sanki Koban to Gores.
To protect others from the extremes of samsara or peace, meaning one who has not one who has not studied the profound emptiness cannot be free from samsara, and one who has not immersed themselves in the mind of bodhicitta cannot be free from the extreme of peace. So this is what is called a partial nirvana. Being without having both of these together, one cannot attain a full enlightenment. One will be in partial nirvana. And so one needs to have bodhicitta and be immersed, fused with bodhicitta, and also needs to have habituated and meditated on profound emptiness to be free and to be free from samsara. And so this we're talking about is having both of these together is the great vehicle, is, you know, this what is called here the sacred mystery, or what we could call the secret teaching of the great vehicle of Mahayana, something that is not mixed or connected with an I, someone who is practicing only for oneself. So one transcends this with the secret teachings. Otherwise, one might be, you know, meditating in a perfect posture and really looking, you know, like their face is in complete equipoise. But this is simply, you know, just being attached to kind of like the person's meditation. And this is something we need to get beyond, something that we need to transcend with the secret teachings. When we transcend this, we go beyond the fruition of a partial nirvana, because within the great teachings of the Mahayana, we are including both the teachings of bodhicitta and the teachings of profound emptiness. So maybe we take a break here. Why don't we take our break at this point? Not a long one, Geshe says. Not a long break. Don't get lost for a long time. I was asking Geshe, well, first of all, I asked him about that quote from Chandrakirti, and he will help me later on in the week find it in the introduction of the Middle Way. And I will also try to get that out there on the IBC page, along with the quote from the life story of Chenrezig. That actually was a quote from Chenrezig himself. But anyways, I was asking Geshe in 120, I have the Padmakara translation. The last line says, and thus embrace a sacred mystery. And so in reading the Tibetan, it says, from my understanding anyways, from what I've understood, instead of sacred, it says secret. So in mystery, they have here Dampa, which is like an oral teaching or an instruction. Like the secret instruction is really,
Secret
yeah. Geshe-la is saying it's definitely more like secret, not sacred, and it's instruction. And so what he's saying, just because I wanted to clarify it, is, although we may appear like we're meditating and in equipoise and just like an ordinary meditation, but within Mahayana, the practices that are very like exclusive and extraordinary, there's a lot going on behind that, meaning, the attitude of, we're placing others first and, lessening our grasp on the self. That's a lot going on in the motivation of secret mantra that is not, others aren't able to detect. So we enter into the practices of the secret mantra. And also he said, so kind of secretly, we're engaging in it internally, it's inner work. And he also said there's a second kind of an understanding with this secret. The word like secret mantra or secret teaching here, it says, is that, really these, there are some people that wouldn't be able to understand the meaning, like the deep meaning, because it's very profound and, there's a lot that, is going on and it's not for everybody. And so for those who couldn't wrap their minds around it, it is something that we should keep like undisclosed, just not disclose it to them. So that's the other meaning, he said, of what you could understand from what should be and thus embrace a secret teaching, means practice the secret teachings, which means the great vehicle.
Rajan Jebegone Semke, the Tape Simki Janju Sebastian do Wambu Numbugi Semke Dan Chadiorwa. Tindugala Shibuji Zachmu Chadiore. Chazat Tindi Semke Dela, and Pe Sipata Jiwa Niki Taslegi Siji Taniga Selgiri, Sundugala, Tatongi Niji Nimbuchin Chabare. Dila Tongi Niji Nimbuchin Sungdwa. Zamotombani Zimbi Semke Dela Tongi Niji Nimbuchins. Tabji Zundel Tate Chadre, Missiva Ketchimbu Chadiore. Tindunga to Sanwachi, the Pe Ketchimburi.
So the mental attitude of exchanging self for other, this generating of a sincere altruistic attitude, is a practice for those of very, very sharp faculties. This is actually a very, very precious and sacred instruction, very, very sacred teaching. For it is with bodhicitta and an understanding of emptiness that we are able to be liberated from the extremes of existence or peace. And that's why there is this saying, which is called, like the great antidote of the profound emptiness and compassion. And so when we take this profound emptiness and bodhicitta, when we have both of these together in an inseparable union, fuse these two together, then we have, that which is called the great antidote or remedy, or this is also referred to as the indivisible union of method and wisdom. And so, for that reason, this is something that is practiced in a way, that is kind of a way that we keep it like very precious and very secret.
Okay, Karsa, Lojong Tundim, Lojong Tige Menio, Samet Ambacha Perchazadi, Yan Tonlin Chidigala, Yan the K Chimbuji Tonlin Chidigala, teaching Tape, Simgegi, Sawarij Tengi and Zante Beg Ures Sundua. Samet Ambacha Perchazadi, Samasi Sundua. What that the no tomorrow at Timendang, Ranchin Shuchumo, and the Tendala, Jindin Chisiade, Luni Chugo Marwa. Machitugala Kanchita Tanda de Vajin Yamjagap, Net Chambushu Chabara, the Tonitope, Luzimbe, Chanju, Sem Gomia Sungora, they see Tanya Waja in the Missiva Chambuchaya Resra, some Luyabotangores.
Dene Tony Tope Lodzin.
Tony Tan Chanju Sem Zungun Ta, sometimes Chadiora.
Oh, lasso. And so, this very, very, like what Geshe had just been speaking about, this, inseparability of these two together, taking, a profound realization, understanding of emptiness together with bodhicitta. So taking these as an inseparable union is something that is really, very, very like a monumental point.
Yeah, Tanda Junjun Devan Disungdo. Dila Siji Taniga Nibayaki, Jelani Metal was a Sungdo. Kanji Tanda Kani Shed Chape Kanji Dada Jen Namni, Nurtu Chopran Dobate, take up the Tensha Gogi, Semketela, Sipa Kruit Tadam. Juan Yandi Taniga Selga Nibayore. Jenla yo mare se sundu ala pe misib ne chimbucha de ore. Tindi ke chimbucha de ore.
And so here, and like it is said, to actually get to the point of a fruition that transcends the extremes of existence and peace. And this is what we do through this practice of that we're training in here. When we cultivate such a mind, as is in this verse number 120, desiring speedily to be a refuge for themselves and others. It is actually, this wish, generating such a wish, this kind of an altruistic wish, is part of that equation that gets us beyond the extremes of existence or peace. So actually transcends samsara and nirvana.
Yeah, that is subject Nipa. That is Yebrashibadala subject sum, that is subject sum yune, Jen Jinzin, Kumbarchavatan, that Jinzin Bepe Pawa, that Jen Sochin, Hyundai Yundensha Bazil, Sumyo, that Jen Jinzin the Tsare, that Jinzin Bepe Pawa asking the Jure. That Jinzin Bepe Pangu race, what that did Desigore. That Jinzin Bepe Pawa, Yan such a Ni Jure, Naseki Ni. Tangpu Karezana, Van Jinzin Jipa Tataki Yun Bas, Jipa Tadungal, Jipam, Dungal Tataki Yures, Ran Jinzin, Rat Jinzin Sing, Jipa Tataki Yures. Any Nipadala, Nicho Tatala Georgepa, Nicho Tatalapa, Jargan the race, Yun Tatal, Nicho Tatala Georgepa. Jorazane, Gui. Jargende, Nijo Tata Teleteni, Nijo Tata Yungris, Kyun Mampu Yungris, the Nidwa, Kyun or Nipa the Kyunroa, what then is La Jargres, La Laga, the Nipadre. Ta Ranchinzin, 다 진진 지바 타다가 유인 받았다 야당 니수세 지바들이 솔로가 야당 니수세 지바들.
Okay, so now we have within the breakdown of classifications of what we have been looking at. We have been looking at the faults or the faults and qualities of either self or other cherishing, the cultivation and training on cherishing others, and the abandonment of self-cherishing. So now we finished looking at how to familiarize, habituate, and train in cherishing others. And now we look at the abandonment of self-cherishing, in which there are two sections. And the first looks at so this is striving and the abandonment of self-cherishing. This self-cherishing being the very root of all of our suffering and fears. And then secondly, that there are this self-cherishing is really filled with many faults and misgivings. This really meets with many faults and misgivings. And so now we turn to page 100, verse number 121.
어다 다티게 다 진진 지바 타다게 유인 바스타 진진 긴 삼마 마코르겐 바 진진 슈초보 용인데 간사들라라 거래. value kanla chapa is jini chungla jije pas tabe yin jinjin la samu makoren ranjin shu chobo yo kanje be susu lila shibu ji tabe chajin ki gorwa jeje dusjene ani thana jipa chunchun jina tepe chembo sorgres jipa chungla jije pas jipa chunchun jina turanzon jina be jinan ki gres chunchun bezunjana teni jipa kewe luitela sujin raji dami jasta jinjin jindenge kaza jila teni rangi lula chabe chapadra pe tila pe tarung lula chabe chapadala ne pe dalta ko jene dangwa jene ne tele yoguri is sungore pe kechmudwa.
Where it says, because of attachment to our bodies, even little things alarm us. So now you take someone who has such a strong sense of an I, who really lives such a self-serving existence. Someone, for example, like this, never really thinks about others. It's always about themselves. Then when they meet with any difficulties, physical difficulties or anything that bothers them, then, it's something that, that really becomes unbearable for them. They meet with a little thing, and yet it becomes like they make such a big deal of it. Their body, physically, they're quite affected by even the smallest little thing that comes up. Because of such a strong sense of a self, the magnitude of what they go through is just much larger. It magnifies, this sense of an I magnifies small things, small fears, so that these little fears grow into something very, very, very large. And this all comes, from a sense of an I. And then further on it says, this body then, this source of so much terror, who would not detest it as the worst of foes? And so if, this is something that brings us such difficulty and also keeps us away from an altruistic attitude, why would we not detest it? Why would we not be repulsed by it?
어다 준준 대회드나 가르송도 저들가라 단다디 지바타다기 윤바스데 쇼로고 야등이 수제지 바테당 거기 그 강라 던디기 치지와 던디 가르사 던디치데 라니 견진전라 양시도 바제 쇼로고 야등 야다 중니 바드레 라니 견진전라 양세데 던디기 치드레 라쟁냠제게 던디기 치드레 띵인 제니 삼타나 빼 야부여레스 숭도
라소
가르잖아 라니 견진전라 양세나 랑 진진라 꾼도 타고도 젠라 양세데 젠 시디가라 젠 진진라 연된도 타야 오다 때라 랑 진진라 꾼 타용도가라 타나 타야데 야부지 주이나 이니 탄다디 가르소거래 쇼로게 야등이 스테지 받달라 배 고알라버키 그레스
라소
펜도용 그레스 란친질리 꾼도 말타브라 타단디 게몰아야데 차그로와 단다디 시라게 고알렙 투마르와 와 랑기 류라네 배 차진기 그레디 지바 춘춘인 지바 첨부 초그레스 아니 남주저 란 진진진네 배 la nyua yondengenjila ene be kebatendila ene be rang lula ne chapa de la shirage ndana jintagres tingone rwata susu jinjin cheginjira rangila tazamchi samkhurgu marwa ota titzupe tingan jin
kare kogi mare
rang jinjin susu le kepen tag marwa 옌진진 책임지기 잔주 세바데게 고난 개변 사고마로 심진 된 간데스 제고도 따그러와 어때 숨고아래 어때 띵인 데니 다니 견진자 란친진라 꾼도 따도가 단데 띵인 데니 삼당 거레스 대 펜도 용거레스 결혼서 드린 데니 직 삼당다 간디도 따다
okay. So now here, this verse that we're looking at right now in verse number 121, because of our attachment to our bodies, even little things alarm us. This body, the source of so much terror, who would not detest it as the worst of foes? Is now actually connected. Geshe says he has a commentary here. In his commentary, it speaks to going back to when we were talking about in another section about applying like meaningfully and rationally. If we go back to 112, it suggests here in the commentary that we go back to 112 and reread. So this is back in the section in regards to exchanging self and others. Remember, we have the more brief and then the more elaborated sections. This is back in the more brief meaning section in 112. It suggests that we really reread this. And if we reread this, think about it and see how it then back applies to 121. So back in 112, this was about looking at, the faults within oneself, the imperfections within oneself, and especially looking at applying and identifying some fault in the attitude of our constant like self-obsession and self-care and making everything about ourselves, we should really think about it. Because then it will make understanding verse number 121 easier. It will really seek in. So if we go back to 112, it says, and so why not identify another's body, calling it my I? And vice versa. Why should it be hard to think of this, my body, as another's?
Rani Chinzin Hupa Kunjilo, Manam Jinzi Yenden Kunji Jingzede. What are Rani Chinzin Siada, Va Chinzin Siada, Tontachi Para Kuni, Guba Tamchiki Zaware, said Siadan, any Rani Kunjin Jela Yang, the Rani Kunjin, the Ran Chinzin Lode, Kun Tamchiki Zawadari, Kun Tamchi in Jungsadar, in Jungu, there is a soon Galayam Zinjdoa.
And so, because if we don't place fault, so here we have to remember, if we don't place some fault in our obsession to ourselves, then, you know, this is something that we won't be able to really transcend. We won't be able to get past. If we don't see it like as an enemy, this like self-obsession, see how it hurts one. See how obsessing over, you know, just being so obsessed about our looks or our body is really the enemy. And so this is something that we, you know, really have to examine and see how we're very cherishing and very obsessing when it comes to ourselves. Because otherwise, you know, we won't be looking to then change and have this shift in wanting, you know, in the need to do something very beneficial and have a shift in our attitudes about shifting outward now and really making everything that we do, you know, really about others. And so Geshe-la asked, you know, what do you think about that? What, you know, what are people, you know, thinking about this? Is the first thing that he asked. And secondly, he then brought up the, I'm not sure I think I have it here, the quote that really applies to this from the Guru Puja that he mentioned last week. And he brings us back to this, he said, because this quote from the Lama Chupa really comes down and points, you know, out that the self-cherishing attitude is the root of all our suffering and misery. The mind of self-cherishing is the place from where all of our faults and our sufferings arise. It's the very root of our suffering. And so he read this again. So I'll read it here. Since cherishing ourselves is the doorway to all torment, while cherishing our mothers is the foundation of all that is good, we seek your blessing to make our core practice the yoga of exchange for self and others.
Subject nipa nyeche thatala jor che patara ta karza sholoko sum legidwa sholoko sum nishu tsa ni de che ani nishu tsa sum ge kampa tangpo ni de tangpo de kanchi kampa tu in de che chi jamna dos chene lukang te tang komnet komso ne es ta Rang Chinzi Shu Chumbu Yangi, Rang Lui, and Pe, Combadang, Jebas no Togo Topa. And the Nigitape, Netanted, Sui Choka Chindepe, Chadang Yata Ridata, Superching, Lamgu, Jes, Lamgu, Sidatape, Chapagan, any Pe, Tangtopolo, Guj enemy, the Chapagan Norchum Gora, what a Tessigore. Kaji Ketan Rimdruchir, Padamayas. Such a things 다 랑지 뜻속한가 랑진지 용을 파미 연댕 파미 띵내 삼 고르고 말해라 그래 등원으로 와 말한서 랑진지 슈충부 영한테서 아니 구마게거라 짜파게거라 라퉁거라 미시콜로 간가 랑진지 나배 기부 주는 나 야가 주는 나디 노르든 더는 삼데 지겨워 봐 아니 정간도 우도 간주 먼저 제네는 배 이갈갑라 정간 전부 자고 우도 세상이 배 랑진지들이 배 룰을 잘겐지리도 와 원에래도 와
And now again, continuing to look at, in the second section, the faults of self-cherishing, the misgivings and faults of self-cherishing. We look at, further on within the next two verses, 122 in the beginning, the first two lines of 123. Where it reads, wishing to relieve our body's ills, our hungry mouths, the dryness of our throats. And so, out of our own, just completely self-centered caring about what we ourselves are going through, such as being hungry or thirsty, caring solely about ourselves, then, as it says in the text, we steal the lives of fishes, birds, deer, and lie in wait along the road. And so, for oneself, just solely thinking about what one physically is going through, disregarding anything else, will just ambush, just lie in wait and ambush just to satisfy our own selfish needs. And we can even, go to more extremes, as it says in the next, in the next 123, the beginning of 123. And for the sake of profit and position, some there are who even kill their parents. And, this is really true. If we think about when we are overcome by wanting, by desiring, out of a strong sense of I and wanting, when we're so, like jonesing for something, we'll steal, we'll rob, we'll even turn to murder. This sense of, we become like really we have the, the sight narrowers. We have, all we can see in that moment is what we want. We're not thinking at all of the consequence that, one will have to undergo. We are driven by this strong emotion that is based in an I, not even thinking about the consequence. We could end up in jail or even in federal prison, doing these kinds of things. Where does it come from? Really comes from, in that moment, being so caught up by what I want, what I desire, what I'm obsessing over, that we do some really, really terrible things.
Oda sholoka nishu sasum kamba chima nida nishu tsebjibategi kar ta jikpa sungo ingyo koncho sumgyu korgu nas tenin narme sekyu nas ta ngaranzo koncho lo pulshagyo lakangre chogangre dukangre tenel pulshagyo ke yuchala kumagyadang ani tende kesi jene mitsambacha tezu jebaina nyawanarme de kigres tape kigres kepas suji luitela dejing sungdang sojejing tele luijin rajindu tawarmiche nyemiche ese sungda ta kepa sedigala namjo inde rajin jenso jendenge tende pe chanchu seba ani kepa namjo jendedo rangi luila pe tezamchi sunya tondale dipa sagmar nyeji tende sagmares so pe oda tinin taku ko lido chotamji khalaji pe garasware chede timbe khalaji zagro mado tana loso indegen 소아이나 전주습이 롱주고 말와 로베스 곰블루르고 순도 로베 소아 곰판에 추진 소에 소어쇼 시드갈라 가르스 공와래 로베 소아 시드갈라 구마게니 둠데교 아니 총간에 캡사 첨부전에 잔 유사한데교 대수잖아 로초리 아니 루이존의 데이터니 소아테나 로초리 본조고 꼴 구마게는 잔아 로초리 어쨌든지 지기어 말해서 추진 소에 소아서라 외진 셈바 소수 의법연대긴지 쓰고래
Chudang Erpa, Karegidang.
최단 툼바
Chudang Tupa, Karegi Erpa.
스스로 왕자 연대긴 다 의법연대긴 대산한 지게 인대긴 아니 팀다 민갈킹 된디지 고고 어쨌든지 된디지 마다 롱지고 말해라래 아니 어다 된디지래 간제 랑진진 된데기 초아되게 될 시부 전주습에 롱지고 말해서 송르다.
And so in the next, we bring together verses, the end of 123 and 120, all of 124, where it says here, or steal what has been offered to the triple gem, because of which they'll burn in unrelenting pain. And so, be it something that has been, an offering, to the Dharma center or the temple or the Lama or the Buddha or the shrine, then this is something that if, one then steals it and uses it, takes it, that it's said that the result of this will then be to suffer in Avicii hell, the hell of unrelenting pain. And in 124, where the wise and prudent then, who cherish, guard, and serve the body, who would not perceive it as their foe, and as their foe regard it with contempt. And so here it says the wise and prudent. And here this is, the wise and prudent are those who, using their wisdom, then conduct themselves in a certain way, like the great masters are the bodhisattvas who really use their wisdom to guard their actions, guarding their actions so that what they do is in accord with the Dharma. And so acting in accord with the Dharma is something that is just their discipline. This is just the way they go about their activities. And Nagarjuna has said that using, like this guarded or disciplined action to go about their livelihood. So we wouldn't go about, going about one's livelihood to involved in stealing, or conducting livelihood for business, or stealing from... So to be involved in business in a way that is just to receive great profit, or to steal from that which, steal from the three jewels, that which belongs to or has been offered to the three jewels, is something that would not be in proper conduct. And so, those that are wise and prudent are, involve themselves in a way that doesn't go against, like, the rules and regulations. And, they don't make mistakes in their actions and go, against these regulations, again, in accord with the Dharma. And so it's with self, as we've seen in these verses, strong sense of self-clinging and obsession that drives us, brings us away from our guard here, so that within our livelihood we are not in accord.
Oda dosida jamadeni yadani sengabanra lojong mumadre lojang mumadre leading nidiga jarmuj judugala nidigala togebshado de lojong muma tam go to gore tam kangolan zabzab jagornga so ta kindena susu semlan gro matana 기부용에 빼 가버다.
가래 삼라마교나?
semlan gro ran jinjin chu chung다. jinjin chu 체루다네 그러지 마다나 semgi diki시에 또 가버래. 그 니지스인데 가서 저 뚝뚝 장 삼무당 삼들레 니지배 직 만다지 깨용도 갈라 semle diki 김낭 만다지 레기도 이거 뭐 대기민도 마다 내나다 항상 이렇게 만대바대가 가르잖아. 맞죠? 좋아. 곰비 윤싱마도 되기로 와. 곰비 윤싱도나 곰그 고링루 넣어야래. 때 미스베 깨침버다. 오늘 잡잡적 거래. 당가중 엄마 로종들에 레거래. 단다 버도 때 로종 제약이 답에 뇽 로종 명약이 견데 차당 뭉숨 대난에 랑 진진 당 렘버즈메딘 띵이기 답에 로종 때 냠네 야부 명 견데 되게 어려워. 계속 견데서 셔버래. 다때 디니 로종 외만 고주야 돼. 삼로 야부 땅 강가로네 삼로 땅 야니양도 배절로 가져지 삼로 코르시리 semla juwan dugure pe pendo chimboare nangpe chuje de wangshi korgi churwa dewa cham chale marda ishi korgi ishigi churwa dewa chugor duba ishigi churwa dewa chalgore
laso ani yanke di
nangpe chugi tape dewa nyoyaji dewa jiorwa nangpe nyanenchene
dewa nyong
dewa nyoyaji orwa 왕시 코르 말해 왕시 있나다 레라버와 맞아 칼라 짐부지는 총리 녀야요래 애니 둘로 닝제부지는 녀야요래 미니 통야 안 다님부 녀야요래 너아 대서 레라버도 다 semla 기루아 당야데 카쇼드레
올라서
줄루 잠발에 빼 가버다 다디 땅이라나 라바레 캡산 디 땅은 랭고레
So now we've come to a new junction in the text, and Geshe-la held up his text and says that he's marked it because actually this is where His Holiness himself says the actual training really begins. This is where the actual practice starts. And really, the point of the practice, these trainings that we have been reading about to have one's self-cherishing attitude decline and to really cultivate and increase the attitude that cherishes and cares about others, this is something that is really transformational. This is what brings one peace of mind. That which we call compassion is something that we need to encourage on. We need to train in this mind of compassion. We need to think about what it means. We need to train in it. We need to cultivate it. And when we do, we can really be brought to a very, very special feeling where we really feel this compassion. We feel it, though, at this point, generally just for a short period of time. We'll get glimpses of what it means to really feel compassion, then this is something we cultivate more and more until we can really maintain and extend the period of time for which we're feeling this true compassion. So we're just really lengthening this experience, really drawing it out so we can feel it and for longer and longer periods of time. When we can do this, then we have like reached some kind of a fork, reached some kind of a juncture. And so now we say that the part of the text to come is the real practice. Up until now, what we've been looking at, in these preliminaries, this, what has come before, is we've been looking at attachment, aversion, and ignorance. We've been looking at the faults of these, and we have been looking at the fault of not abandoning self-cherishing or clinging to a true and substantial reality. So we've looked at those and looked at the fault of not overcoming those. And now we come to the actual practice. And so Geshe asks us to go back and read what we have been studying. Read these trainings. Read that which we have been to habituate up until this point and really think about it. And do this until a feeling arises in your mind that is very transformative. Because this is where we need to get to at this point in the practice. And if we can, then this is really very, very beneficial for us, for our practice. This is the beneficial part. And so this is how we get there. Go back, reread these things. Again, immerse yourself in them until, it's really transformative for you. Because, the practice of the Buddha Dharma, like the great happiness and bliss of the Buddha Dharma, this is something to be experienced. So we're to experience the great bliss of the Buddha Dharma, the great happiness that can arise from the practice. But we're not talking here about, the happiness and pleasure that we get, sensorial, from the senses. Finding something delicious to eat. Yes, we can find pleasure and enjoy something to eat. And, but it's not the sensorial pleasure that we're looking to be transformed by. We might find like beautiful clothes to wear that feels and looks so great. We might be able to surround ourselves with things that are beautiful to look at, or sounds that entrance us, and songs that make us feel happy. But this isn't what we're looking to do. It's the mind. It's really something transformative that we're looking to do with the mind, to find the happiness of the mind. And this is the most, actually one of the most difficult things, senses, to then find transformation and find happiness in. But this is the point of the practice, and this is something that we really, really, really need to take to heart here.
Yeah. 다. 오, 주정하다 제가 좀 좋다. 야, 다. 그래서 좋아요는 땅이야.
So now that we've reached this point and gone over all of this, we've come to the point where, as we've said, the Dalai Lama says we've reached the actual point of practice, and but we'll stop here for today. It's 5:30, so we'll stop in the text, but Geshe wonders if anyone has any questions.
Actually, I brought up in class that I don't know the answer to.
Okay,
were
I missed
talking
the
about
first
the
part of that.
7-point
You were
posture.
sorry, you were digitalized there for a moment.
Oh, that's an aspiration we all have. So in one of my classes today, the question came up concerning the Namsu Chudunma, the 7-point posture of Vairochana. And I've never heard this request before. I've not been able to find this. But I have a sneaky suspicion that the answer regarding tantric practice might be different. So we're said that when you place the hands in the lap, the right hand is to be placed over the left hand. Would that be different for a female practitioner? The only reason why I thought it was a good question to ask is in Tibetan medicine, when a female doctor takes the pulse of the male patient, they reach the opposite hand, but when a male doctor reaches a male patient and takes their pulse, they use the same hand.
Their own hand or the person they're taking the pulse's hand?
It goes right to left or left and left, depending on what gender is taking the pulse.
So, okay, just for me to check, they're changing the patient and the doctor's hand are changing?
Yeah, I think, so if I'm the doctor and you're the patient, I would use my right hand to your left wrist, I think, or I've got it backwards. I know that it's not universal, is the question.
Okay, Pelcher, okay, I think I can ask. Ani Geshe la Pelcher ani di Pelcher di Tsawa ani Sadang ani Drolgi Yogere ani Namnang Chuptuma la ani Kerang Nangyun di ani Natso di Lapa di
Lapa yema de yo like yopa the gang dos jayare.
Nangyun ani Dux ani Chayore Yena Yang ani Pena ani Bumo Yena ani Bumo Yena Jebo Gap ani Yungi ani Togla ani Yungi Wola Kanyan Sena di Mempa ani Marki Koala di Mempa Nat Konso Gitsa ani
Teta khagare.
Okay.
Member ke salta de gala fosa masa changchu samsa in lares. Sap pomola lapa yema de ngul ta yefa de gang ta pula lapa yefa de ngul ta yema de jugul ta yare.
Yena yang di nang chuktumala ani Jebo Gap go yo mare.
Tindi goye yo mar bhanchar. Te
Okay.
tindi mindu bhajar thong masong pechene mindu.
So, Geshe-la, probably you understood that, Mark, but I'll explain it for everyone else. Geshe-la did indeed say that there are differences when doctors check the pulses between male and female. So, there is a difference between right and left and male and female. There are distinctions made, but in terms of meditation posture, it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. The right goes over the left. And up until this point, he's not seen it written in any text that you should change that.
Pagina sagin rotan pume lugi zan rotan da pu lugi zan rotan de kaga chade yore. Tinjugala posa mosa changchu sem sade tangbu ta wore. Pumu chola yuma de la tangbu yore. Bu yefa de le yore. Changchu sem sade.
Bumala
Yun chola yore.
Yun chola.
Pula ye chode yore. Tinjugala pumola salta digala yema chode ngulalta yefa de jugulta. Bulta de yefa de ngulta yema de jugulta ya tindere. Sagin rotan koran kaga chabarwa. Tatana di dus che de la tindigi sundin ke yomare.
Okay. Ani di amjiki ani pomoki kebar ani pena di amjiki ani bumo yana ani yana di nepa.
Oh, amji pomoina pomogi pomo amjiki pultana. Saya yomata tagore tangkuni.
Laso.
Pomo tadi yomata tagore. Ichipare.
Okay. Oh, di ngetri wore. Pena amji ni yana. Okay, budang bumogi amji ni yana nepa ani bumo yana di konso di kebar yorbe.
then
Kopso tapche.
bumoyina the yumadal tower.
No, the amjigi bumo yamena di nepa gi bumo.
The kebrioma Nepal tower, Nepal de bumoyina, Lapa yumadal taya.
Di
Nepal
keba di
oh, tiri.
keba di nepa gi keba re. Di
Nepal.
amjigi kema
Mare.
Oh, lasso. Okay. So Geshe was just explaining that there are indeed within the channels of our bodies, there are differences in the channels if one is male or female. So there is one channel called the like the Bodichitta channel, the channel that carries Bodhichitta. And so in between a male and female, these are different. Within the male, or within the male, it's the right, and within the female, it's the left. And so when a doctor goes to check this channel, they would indeed be either doing left hand or right hand, left side or right side, depending on if the patient were male or female. However, and I had my own question to clarify, does it matter if the doctor is male or female? He said, no, the difference is in the patient, not in the one checking the patient, not in the doctor. However, again, he says that within our own meditation practice, this doesn't change the placement of our hands.
Excellent. I have one other question. I always...
So those the tabshi zundel tsungorwa.
So, and Geshe not so any tong to kimendo kerangi chakyadi. So Geshe
Tebu injimiji tu gore. Sati tumu gumgen na di zursum che gore injimiji. Tumu gumgen mena khoten duchen di gore.
Karegi gorsum.
Ma ge tumu gumgen na di gala tuschene zursum tong gore.
Di zorsum tewagi zorsum karegi zorsum.
Dini tuchin this chede ya langdu gala tusum yungdo.
Okay.
Te tumu gumgen lai gore. Te mado gomar dus chede tu nandi gore.
Okay. So I don't know if everybody could see that all.
Okay, te laboya mindo dandi gore.
Oh, lasso. But I'm not sure if everybody could see. But Geshe was saying that when you put your hands together like this, then I don't know if you can see me because I can't see myself, so I don't know. Okay, so this shows, so Geshe will show us. So this symbolizes method, the inseparability of method and wisdom together. And he said you must put your thumbs together, they must meet. So this is symbolic of the union of method and wisdom. But when one is a Tummo practitioner, so there's a practice called Tummo or inner heat, then the hands for Tummo gi kapsu, yeah. So you hold it like a little bit higher. They're a little bit higher up. Yeah. So then you see that it's a little bit different when you're doing Tummo or inner heat practice.
Is it okay to ask my second question? I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So I've forgot this question for years, and it's been something that every time I think about it, there's no translator. So I have to remember it now. So let me start by asking, is it okay to ask a question regarding the tantric vows?
Geshe marki ani ngaki dompa dangdrelwe gi kandre shuna digiyona.
Kanga wang mathogelate kona ya yabu yimare.
Yeah, it's not the best time to ask that about that.
Wang kanga wang thogena ni sukagare wang mathogena numirela sanse ten sanga giti kanjumoju thumda jede yo marangani.
Because what we have to understand is not everybody has had the proper initiations to, that are related to, secret mantra. So as there may be those that haven't had the related and necessary initiations or empowerment, so better You know, this isn't the venue to
That's
have.
why I asked. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Tele kazan dagin jeson kun dagin kachitigido. de la jinwa thara ki khabarde. Jinwa thamola gewayore. Jinwa thamoda ni nor nyaga yore. Te peke chemborda.
Okay. Young kids chikti chingwa.
Jinwa thamoda rakpa ni yore. Jinwa de la.
Uh-huh.
jinwa thamoda ni nor nyaga yore.
Okay, di dog dang.
Dagi kazanga kachitigido. Ni
laso.
kachitil koro
Laso.
Kejiri kachiti that they agree line the
Okay. So earlier there was the question that Geshe-la would like to ask now, and it might have, you know, so I think, you know, either Doug or Doug asked it for someone, but anyways, getting this information out. So we have what is called, you know, within our meditation, we have like two kind of impediments to our meditation. Sometimes our minds can be overactive and agitated, or sometimes we can be really dull or sunken. And this is about this second impediment, which is kind of being dull and sunken. And within that, then there are two categories. There is like a coarse dullness or sunkenness, and a very subtle dullness or sunkenness. And it's the second category. It's very, very subtle. And there is a real risk of getting stuck here, of like really like habituating a kind of meditation that actually is mixed with a little bit of dullness and lethargy. One can get like in the habit of sticking with that. And Geshe-la said that this is not favorable.
Ta jinwa siede karere digala ngazo gomge digala mite gala semde nediyo ache mite de salbo mena jinwa rabale diore tedi
Kare gondak
gomge digala mite jiro gomge gepsagi jisare
really
ji semde mite gala tata neyo bache mite de salbo mena salcha mena salcha mena jinwa rabale diore tela norea yo mare tela kanga haku gore ta norea de kardana mite gala ne yo bache salfo yo arche salche ngar mena jinwa thamore
ngar sena
ngarshu sem salcha shu chumbo sem salche ngarshu de mena jinwa thamore
laso
yidan gomni nornya ga yore
laso. So now let's look at how to identify these two, either a coarse dullness or a subtle dullness or sunkenness in your meditation. Excuse me. So as for coarse dullness, this is when one is meditating, one has the object of one's meditation, one's mind is staying, like one's mind is still on the object of meditation, and yet one has lost like a vividness or clarity of holding that object. So the mind is still, but the clarity is lost. Like the vividness of what one was visualizing or gazing at is now lost. So this is like coarse dullness. And this is something that is, you'll know when this happens. You'll know when you're missing, like things are out of focus. It came out of focus. So you'll know that. So there's no danger of getting stuck there because it will be obvious. However, when it comes to the impediment of subtle dullness, one's mind is still, one's mind is settled on one's focus, you know, whatever one is focusing on, and it's clear. However, like the force behind it is gone. Like there's engagement is lost. Like the oomph that holds some kind of engagement, that's gone. And so there is a danger of just being still in that place. But you don't have kind of like this dynamism, like this dynamic that is necessary for meditation. You've lost that.
What 가르잖아 지와 참으로 곰도 출리나 때 곰바슈 춤부 지와 참에 가는 곰바슈 춤부는 릭바교를 거래 남쪽 등에다 교를 조사고 그래
릭바교
교부차고 그래 남쪽이 교부차고 그래 가르잖아 그유 라마지 겨울무지 둥은 챙긴지래 센터 순구민도 당부 구잠나 마주가라 이니 겨울무지 년선주 구잠나주 제마 구잠 돌디가라 겨울무지 제가 잡도와 제가 저대니 참 간주종선 참배 야부종데 마 참데 돌리용데가 니 남쪽에 또 수교를 친샤세 송도세 겨울무지게 이 라마데 지와 참모 사샤레스 지와 참모도 엄도 출동해서 송도
라서
대삽삽적으로 뺏게 전부래 말한서 지와 참모도 엄니 노리니가 지와 사나 빼 두자요 엄상보용 말에
And so actually when we make it our habit to meditate in this way, in a very dull and unengaged way, what this can do is it can really affect like our intelligence, the sharpness of our mind. It can really diminish the sharpness of our mind. It can really affect it in a way that it degrades. Our own mental acuity degrades. And so there was a Kagyu Lama, and so this is a story that His Holiness tells about a Kagyu Lama, and Geshe doesn't remember the Lama's name. However,
okay.
So so my correction, my mistake. It's not that Geshe doesn't remember. His Holiness didn't use the Lama's name. That wouldn't be so good, right? To like point him out in, publicly. So I'm so anyway, so this Lama was going on retreat, and he went on retreat, and then afterwards, after his retreat was over, then His Holiness, he was invited for an audience with His Holiness. And so he had an audience with His Holiness in which, His Holiness then asked him, he was on long retreat, and so His Holiness said, how did your retreat go? And so the Lama, this Kagyu Lama said that, once his retreat ended, he found that actually, like his intellect, his sharpness of mind had somehow been affected. It had somehow, his mental acuity had diminished somehow. And so His Holiness said that this was due to remaining in a state of meditation that we've been talking about, this meditation marred with subtle dullness. And so this is the reason his intellect, his mental acuity had kind of been damaged a little bit, it degraded. And so we must really be very, very careful to not get stuck in a meditation that is tainted with or mixed with like a dullness that doesn't have like the engagement that we need. It is just, very, very dull, even though our mind is still, because this isn't actually what's, called like good and excellent meditation.
Jinwatara Jetang, any Jinshi Tenda Sebuhagwa Bekichimburi.
Mhm. So therefore, it's really important that we don't just, during meditation, sit in a blank state, because we always must have the observer, the vigilance of an observer that is watchful over whether we have become distracted by something, outwardly, sounds and smells, whatever it might be, or that we have sunken and lost any engagement whatsoever. We must always have a vigilant mindfulness.
Oh yeah. Jinwatara Bekichimbudwa, Jinwatara Jedi. Jedi Jinwatam, Women's Jinwatam Sana, Susu Gungragudwa.
So this is a really important point, to be able to understand what subtle dullness is and why it negatively affects us if we meditate in that state. So, this is something really important to know and understand.
Yeah. That culture Shuzuchi Tabachi, Tagi only John Tanson, they can't John Rat.
Oh. So Geshe,
Yeah.
Geshe says he's gone over, 1 hour over again. So Doug, here we are, another hour over in one of our sessions. So I think we'll stop here.
Yeah. Sohanjo Sanjo Rimboje, Maki Pana, Kingurji, Kawa Nyamba Mebaya, Kone Kundu Pawara Show, Kari Rave, Kurvi Jingam, Pendan the Malinjum, Chere Zewan Tenzin Gazoe, Jabe, Site, Pato, Penguruji, Jambu Pawe, Chitra, Jambatan, Kundu Sampo, Teda Kunji Zo Daloji, Kawan de Datum, Ratum, to some ship, Kawatam. Bodhicitta,
the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it has arisen, may it ever increase higher and higher. In the land encircled by snow-white mountains, the source of all happiness and benefit flows in your person, Chenrezig Tenzin Gyamso, remain until samsara ends. Just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri obtained omniscience and Samantabhadra too, so now I dedicate these merits to train and follow in their footsteps. As all the victorious Buddhas of the past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme, so now I too dedicate these sources of my merit for all beings to perfect good actions.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Geshe.
Think more.
Thank you, Geshe.
Sangma Senriba Chagores, Semgi Senriba.
So now you all need to be scientists. You need to be scientists of the mind.
Semgi Senriba Fitapo, Jen Seriban Kanga Peltangreda.
So of all the Gonda Geshe-la Yanka?
Semgi Senri, the Semgi Rotha de Abu, Shivaina. Think you Senri Jizing Mare.
And so if you actually are a scientist of the mind and really understand the way the mind works, really understand all of this, then you will ani sendi drotang ani shena
Semgi Rotha de Abu, Semla control Chitan Shena. Tinsan Sendi Pesantau, Mazungulun Ruguare.
Oh, okay. Then actually, if you understand the way the mind works, really get to know the ins and outs of that, then you've really become a modern scientist, a scientist of these times. Cool.
Yeah.
Dirbe genwa.
Re.
Olas.
Pero ngone kozo karsa observer la observer wangshil ma do ishi khonso jashi go martanda.
So they're always, scientists are always, using like these, different telescopes and these different like outer things to observe, but not using the workings of the knowledge and working of the inner mind.
Khane observer de zigbushi gore tindo no wangshil. Mishida nashil tu gore. Deda mishida nashida misang samchen yaga yore.
So what they're really using is the outer things, like telescopes and microscopes and things like, things to, hear things and, but these are, sensorial. These are the, the outer senses, not really coming from the very inner, observing from the sense of mind.
Yeah.
The power of mind. Yeah.
Say thank you everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Sleep well.
You too.
I just want now too.
Thank you, Geshe.
Okay. I just play, okay? Don't take cigarette.
Thank
Thank you.
you,
Julian.
Thanks, everyone. Take good care.
Thank
Be
you, Dianne.
careful.
Stay safe.
Stay well, everybody.